Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. It is my privilege today to have my friend Gary White on Your Brand Amplified for an interview. Gary and I have never met in person, but we were both working during the pandemic. While you were working remotely, I was working a little bit in person for the events and remotely for Shared Harvest Fund and Foundation on a project called My COVID MD, where we did culturally competent community-based testing and therapy and counseling for people who wouldn't normally go to a doctor or go to the hospital to get tested so that we could put out the right information. And we worked on different sides of that, but we formed a bond and we have a conversation every few months, every few weeks. So Gary, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. I've been wanting to be here for a while, but, life has happened in strange ways. Since, we met, my life has become increasingly bizarre.
Yeah. Please share that story because you've done so many different things. When we met, you were doing business development, sponsorship, sales, things like that for that specific project. But your background really is strategy, operations, sales, software, biz dev, like so many different things. So take us back. Weave your narrative. Tell us.
Okay. So I'm 52 years old. I was born in 1971. My first computer was a Commodore 64, right? I considered myself really good with all of that new technology when I was in high school. But after I graduated, it kind of drifted. I didn't get into programming or anything like that. My best friend, which worked for Dell right out of high school and had a 25-year career there. And did amazing. He was a telecom programmer. I fell into sales, and I started out in pawn shops doing retail sales and making loans. And I worked, other retail. I sold mattresses and then kind of worked my way up to cars and boats and motorcycles and that kind of thing. I was a sales guy. I sold everything. I even sold, when I was 21 years old, I made $1,000 in a week selling vacuum cleaners door to door in Austin, Texas. It was incredible. I thought, I have found my path, right? That's what won me over. Yeah. Because I could just talk to people. I could communicate, and I learned very early on that listening is so important. If you listen to people, they'll tell you exactly what they want. Mm-hmm. And then it's pretty easy to match up what they want with what you have. If you have some of what they want, that's been my basis of all sales. Figure out what people want and show them what you have that matches up with what they want. That's it. That's my whole philosophy. If it doesn't match up, go find somebody else. There's somebody else who needs it.
Right. Yeah.
So I had a couple of businesses in Austin. I had a lawn care business and a soda distributing business that was in partnership with my friend who works for Dell. Got divorced in 2011 and had to liquidate both of those businesses much earlier than I wanted. They were successful, but they weren't hugely successful. They were growing, which was great.
Right.
And so that was really hard. And I moved to Colorado and went back to school. And I got my bachelor's and master of science in organizational leadership. So what I saw in all of the sales jobs I've been in is really poor management.
Okay.
And I thought, I'm a good salesman. I was always, middle or top of the pack, in every group I was in. But it always bothered me. I always thought if there were better management, better coaching, I could have done better. I was just kind of making it up as I went along. And there was some training, but it wasn't really in depth back then the way it is now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I decided that I wanted to be a good manager and I wanted to learn how to be a good manager. And I saw that lacking in my field. And so I majored in organizational leadership. And then I got a second master of science in management as well. This is a really important aspect to my story because I was one of the first students that signed up for Colorado State University's online global campus. And I did my entire bachelor's and dual master's through that program.
Wow.
And I will say this, if you're hiring remote workers, people who did their degree online are the people you're looking for.
Okay.
They understand how to work online. They've done it. That saying that college just shows you can show up somewhere, 4 years in a row, right? It's just a certificate of that. Online college shows that you can show up 4 years in a row online. So if you're looking for online workers, take a look at people who graduated with online degrees. It was a great preparation for me. The quality of work, I feel had to be higher because you could not use your personality
right
to win over the professor, Like you had to submit the work and it had to be, reviewed by your peers and reviewed by the professor. And it was just your work and those people reading it. It wasn't you there presenting it. No schmoozing or no politics involved.
Yeah.
And also it was harder to connect with study group and to sort of feed off other people. So you had to go out and get it yourself. I had to really go learn that stuff to be able to write those papers and submit that stuff. So, I feel like it's a better education than the first time I washed out of college in person or the community college experience, because I also got an associate's degree when I first started back. To me, it was a much better experience and it totally prepared me to be a remote worker.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Interesting. But you're living in Colorado because you said you moved to Colorado, but then you still did online school. What happened next?
Well, I decided that, the online school kind of opened my eyes to those possibilities. And this is 2014-ish, right?
Okay.
So I got into the cannabis industry a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a great opportunity for someone like me. I'd started my own business. I'd been in sales. I had a lot of good experience, but I didn't really have a degree. I was working on that. Right. But the cannabis industry, nobody had ever done it before.
Right.
That was the first time it had ever been made legal. So there were no best practices. There were no guidebooks or anything. So I just kind of stepped up and said, hey, I know how to start a business. I know how to do research. And a group of investors out of Denver hired me. And I led their project for a year and a half. And I actually went and lived on site while they built the greenhouses up in the mountains.
Wow.
I was completely immersed and I walked that project all the way through and I brought it in 4% under budget and 3 months early.
Wow.
Which I've never done any kind of construction project. But, in that industry, no one had. And people from other industries weren't touching that industry at the time.
Yeah.
Everyone was very standalone.
The Wild West. So the great unknown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it gave me a real opportunity to do something I'd never done before at a level I'd never done it before.
Mm-hmm.
And to really, really learn. And I took it and I did it and it was successful.
Nice.
And that kind of kicked me off as a small business consultant. When I was in community college in Austin, I'd won a fellowship for an export plan I wrote for a company out of Houston to export to Panama, right?
Okay.
And we had gone, the U.S. Department of Commerce paid for a trip to Panama with me and my professor. It was really great. And I was a great example for them because I was an older student. Who participated in this and won. And, it really highlighted all the benefits for everyone,
Right.
So because of that experience, I had some connections in Panama and I started doing some consulting work for mostly contact centers in Panama. I got a TEFL certificate to teach English as a second language. First, I was going down there and I would coach them in their English skills and I would do sales training at the same time.
Oh my God.
Really great value for those call centers.
Yeah.
And I was at a much, much lower rate than, a company from the U.S. would charge them. And it was really good for me. It was really good for them. So I did that for basically several years until 2018, when my son graduated from high school.
Mm-hmm.
We just decided we were going to move to Estonia.
Wow.
And we packed up and moved to Estonia. It was actually 5 years ago this week, August 14th, 2018, that my son and I left for Estonia.
Why Estonia?
As he was getting ready to graduate, I was looking at the price of universities.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy expensive.
Yes.
So we were in Europe, they're a lot less expensive.
Oh.
And so we were looking at university programs that he might be able to get into in Europe. And we were looking at the living conditions and cost of living in each country. And Estonia had a very low cost of living and a really great overall culture and everything.
Wow.
And what really convinced us was the singing revolution. The way Estonians got their independence from the Soviet Union is they would stop working and start singing.
Wow. I never knew that.
And this spread to Latvia and Lithuania, and the wall was coming down anyway, and the Soviet Union just go. It's okay, just go. But that's how they did it, was singing.
Oh my God.
So this won us over. We said, we got to go to this place. And Estonia is like a fairy tale land. And I met a couple of business partners there, and we started a company. And my son went back to the U.S. to go to college, and I just started.
So he didn't stay in Estonia for school?
He didn't stay for school. He looked at schools there and decided to come back to the U.S. I think there might have been a girlfriend involved in that. But I'm not sure. But he ended up going back to the U.S. and where he is now. And he's actually doing well working in Austin at the Tesla plant.
Oh,
for one of their service providers, not
wow.
actually for Tesla at the plant. So that started me to like being a nomad. And I was kind of doing both in person and virtual stuff. I was still doing some virtual stuff in Latin America because I had good contacts down there. Training with like call centers in Colombia and El Salvador,
Wow.
Guatemala, places like that. And then I started doing that in Eastern European countries too. Bulgaria was a big one. And I actually did a couple in person there.
Okay.
And then I was in Sarajevo and the pandemic hit. And I was locked down in Sarajevo for 6 months. And it was a crazy, crazy time. I was working for Shared Harvest with you.
Yeah.
And it was a little terrifying being in a foreign country, not knowing what was going to happen, But it also was like really an incredible experience, Seeing the way like everyone in the US was going through a lockdown experience and I was going through a completely different lockdown experience.
What was unique about it?
Everyone was so orderly and compliant. And everyone was happy to help each other.
Wow.
Like they were allowing big grocery stores would have lines of people outside and they would allow just a few people in. And like they were making you like fully mask up, gloves, and then they were spraying you down.
Oh my gosh.
Like an alcohol mist.
Wow.
And everybody was fine with this. Nobody refused to wear a mask. Everyone was great. And everyone was super cooperative and super polite. And there happened to be a couple of families of Moroccans that were living near the Airbnb I was staying. And they were cooking outside every day. So myself and other neighbors were gathering at the fence every day and we were sharing stuff and we would bring stuff for them to cook and they would grill it for us all. And it was really, really nice. A really amazing sense of community. So it turned out to be a remarkable experience.
Yeah. And so through all of these, something that's really big now, and you were doing it before, is remote work, right? Remote/hybrid. There's still so much discussion about companies trying to get people back in the office. People don't want to go back to the office, trying to find that balance. So you were already living in that space. You already understood it before the pandemic forced us all to take a look at it. And also another thing that I feel like is important to the story is the gig economy, right? Because you had your own company, but you also were going contract to contract, working for different businesses.
Yeah, I still am really, right? Like the contracts have gotten longer and better, but I'm still like in that same space. And we're even like now merging that into the company itself.
Yeah. So talk about that, because I know one of the exciting contracts that you just finished was with Google. And you were telling me that how they found you. And I think this is really important because I feel like people sometimes discount. Maybe a lot of people use the site, but a lot of people don't look at it as a place where they can get jobs of this caliber. So will you walk us through that a little bit?
I'm going to back up a little bit before.
Absolutely. Are you ready to take your brand to new heights? Join the Brand Amplifier for Entrepreneurs program. Learn how to build, elevate, and amplify your brand with a comprehensive 10-module course. Learn more about it and other ways to implement our strategies at fullcapacitymarketing.com. Click on EFCM Learning Hub for more information. Can't wait to help you amplify your brand.
I got a business development consulting job with a creative agency out of the U.S. Right?
Okay.
A very prestigious agency. This was a big get from, really, really high quality company. They catered to biotech firms and Ivy League universities. Seriously. And what a combination.
Yeah.
So they wanted to do outbounding and they'd never done it before.
Okay.
And, they would relied on marketing, which they were very good at. But they felt like they wanted to be more aggressive and go after more companies and, other universities because they had this name recognition among those sectors. So they hired me in and they put me on a 1-year contract. And what happened was we had about a 600% increase in sales.
Wow.
I just applied the basic techniques. Like this isn't like I came in there and, I'm really humble about this because this is the reality of it. They had a very strong brand. They're very well known in those sectors. So the outreach penetrated really deeply. They already also knew all of the contacts for the decision makers in the organizations. which is a massive, massive gain, right? Like you're way ahead with something like that. And they were registered vendors with these organizations and companies as well, right? Because they'd done work for them before, they were large. So usually in another division, So it was easier than my normal endeavors, right? And it blew up really fast. And they really could not handle the volume.
Oh.
And so 9 months in, they paid me out of my contract.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that was a little staggering. It was a huge victory. It was like, wow, this is great. But I also was like, I'm enough of a data analyst to be able to look at this and see like, all right, this isn't me being a superhero. This is like me effectively deploying their brand assets for them. That's all it was, right? I took that and I went to work next for a custom software company out of Pennsylvania also, right? Mm-hmm. A similar but different experience where we were making some sales and building up some customers, and they were having trouble hiring developers. I was in Albania, and I said, well, let me ask around, right? So I asked some friends, and they introduced me to a young woman who was a developer and knew a lot of developers. And she said, yeah, I think I can help you. So we started supplying them with developers. I formed a company to outsource developers to them. So that was turning into a business. I'm still out there pursuing freelance work. Mm-hmm. I own on Upwork. I get my first job from Upwork, and it's like an e-commerce company, and it's a few $1,000s. It's a really good experience. And then I get my second proposal on Upwork, and I start talking to this woman, and she asked me a lot of questions, and there's a lot of back and forth. So after talking to her for like 2 weeks, she finally revealed that she worked for Google.
Wow.
Google Maps, to be specific. And she wanted, like I said, the two types of business development, the sales development, but also like the documenting of processes and procedures and policies, and like mapping out the program and the playbook, And I had that experience and those credentials, and I fit. And after 6 weeks, 7 interviews with 5 different people, I was hired through Adecco as a contractor for a 1-year contract. And we built out basically an SMB sales program. Google has field accounts and non-field accounts. So they term those non-field accounts as SMBs, but they are not necessarily. They could be enterprise accounts too. It's just Google classifies them differently. But it was an incredible experience, really pushed my competency, my abilities like to the limits, but also really taught me a lot of what I don't want in my own company.
Yeah.
And how not to do things. And like, one, as a salesperson, Google is a engineering company, and they lead with engineering. So the customer is not first.
Interesting.
And certainly, marketing and sales and the brand image is not first. Mm-hmm. So that's something I wasn't used to, especially working in smaller firms. You know what I mean?
Well, and when you think about Google Maps, reviews, search, right? You think about it in terms of where is your brand going to appear, and how are they serving you for your advertising and all of that stuff. So it's really interesting for us to remember that they're not. Yeah.
And, I think that's kind of on me, right? Like for not realizing, for not educating myself to that level. But, it was a shock. And like I had to adjust to that. And I did, of course, right? I'm a professional, we do. But it's funny how we get used to certain things. And that's like an approach, right? Or a point of view, a perspective that I was really used to from working in smaller firms.
Right.
That was not there. And that was a tremendous learning experience, Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that this contract with Google's over, I found myself like ready to really formalize my own company. Like we'd established the company, we had customers with Skill Dynamics, but I'm like, I'm really thinking about what can we offer here and how can I make this company an expression of what I want my career to be, what I want to do. And what I found was that I'd been going through some therapy for childhood trauma, and as I ended the Google contract, I expected the therapy to be done by then, but it wasn't. It took longer. And so when that contract ended and I lost all of that like structure in my life, everything kind of went haywire. And I had to hit pause, like even on Skill Dynamics for a couple of months and finish my therapy and get back to a better personal space. something I learned putting off the treatment of this trauma for so long, most of my relationships were built on the trauma. So getting treatment for it wreaked havoc in a lot of my personal relationships. Not all. My relationship with my son is still very good, you know, and a few other people, but a lot of my relationships were really devastated and changed as I changed. And what this brought me to is like something we've been sort of close to at Skill Dynamics, but hadn't really found it yet. And this is what it is. In small businesses, the people are everything.
Mm-hmm.
As you grow, the process is making it less about the people and more about the skills, right? That's how businesses grow. But if you're not there and it's all about the people, you have to address it with the people.
Yeah.
You know, our tagline or our kind of slogan for Skill Dynamics from the beginning was rehumanizing talent.
Ooh, okay.
What I'd found in like Albania were these young people who were getting into development, you know, learning to program, who were smart and ambitious and conscientious and really eager to do good work and prove themselves, right? And like, you know, from the beginning, felt like we had to show that part to our customers.
Yeah.
You want a React programmer, but this React programmer is a person.
Right.
And that person wants to do the best work they can. And they want your business to succeed. They want your project to succeed, and they want it to be the best that they can make it. That's what you want in a developer, right? Like even more than the highest proficiency in the skill, you want those characteristics. You know, you still need minimum proficiency, right? And that varies depending on the tasks. But if you have those traits, that's the key to everything, right? And that's how I saw it. And I thought the cultural alignment was more important than like the cost, because you can go and hire developers from other countries at a lower cost, but you're not going to get the same kind of conscientiousness, the same kind of personal responsibility, and the same kind of genuine connection that you're going to get with the developers that we're sourcing, you know, and that is going to matter to a lot of people, not to everyone, but to a lot of people.
Yeah. So when you're matching, you're looking at the company culture and how that individual person will fit into that culture, not only for their skill set, but also for their whole being.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's so important because I've quit really good jobs because of the culture, right? Because I just didn't feel that I fit there. And, you know, I had one person who I was working under who was making life miserable, who ended up getting, I'm thinking of one job in particular, who ended up getting fired later, but not before a lot of really good people had left the company. So this is something that's really important and something, you know, I think a lot of times we say people first, but do we really mean it? Do companies really mean it? And if you don't have that person who fits in your culture, then they're not going to do as good of a job for you. It's not going to be everything that it could be.
Yeah. And, you know, succeeding as a small business is way less about technical proficiency than it is about teamwork. You know, like I've seen people like Mark Cuban say this, you know, the perfect is the enemy of the good enough. Right? Like the good enough will make you rich. Pursuing the perfect will make you go broke. You know what I mean? And like the team matters way more than the product, you know, at least early on, right? If you have the right team, you can make the product everything it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
But without the right team, it'll never be what it needs to be.
Well, and this brings me to the next question, because you were talking about rehumanizing talent, but then you also mentioned that, early on, it's about the people and the team, but that the conversation we were having before we got on this interview was about, at some point, you can't be so dependent on the one person. You have to take the person out and have the policies and procedures and all of that in place. So can you talk about that distinction?
Yeah, that's really kind of where I got to through my own experience. Is like, wow, for my business to be successful, it can't be fully dependent on me.
Right.
There has to be an ability or a mechanism for someone else to lead and to assume these tasks, right? Because I'm not bulletproof, or I'm not going to live forever. I'm not, going to be healthy all the time. I'm going to have to take time off. And, that's just reality. And so like I came to that and like, so how does that match up with like we were talking about the human part?
Yeah.
And it's everything. I've kind of created this example for our conversation. So like companies I work with, when we go in and do like an assessment of them, almost always they have someone like Martha who does the accounting and the bookkeeping, the accounts payable, the accounts receivable, the payroll. She looks after the money, right? And if Martha wants to take maternity leave or she gets sick or, whatever, then everything grinds to a halt, right? You can't have that. You can't grow that. You have to define Martha's role as a series of tasks, as a series of skills that are needed to fulfill those tasks, and break it up into things that can be managed properly with metrics and, desired outcomes, right?
Right.
OKRs and KPIs. You know? Now, that doesn't mean Martha has to go away today or this year or next year or whatever. It just means that you're prepared for when she does, And it means that if you want to grow, you can't keep heaping more and more onto Martha. You now have a structure that you can break out for tasks. So if you're adding more employees and there's more payroll, we can hire a payroll person and take that off of Martha's plate.
Okay.
Right? It becomes much, much easier, And just that peace of mind of knowing what you would do if there was a problem. It's just an example, but every business has these things.
Right.
And if you're trying to grow, you may not be able to see that that's what's keeping you from growing, or these capacities that you're limited to because of how you're structured.
And the fact that the work that you're doing really is about offshore developers, people with different skill sets, putting them into the company, but creating ways for people to have the right people, the right time, but also not at the huge expense that sometimes we face in the United States or in other countries, right? Because especially now we see the trends moving towards the semantics of contractor versus employee. In California, that's a big issue. And now it's starting to become the wave throughout the whole country. I can see a time in the near future when many states, it'll be much harder to have contractors in the United States, right? If they're overseas, that's a different story. But if they're here and they have certain work deliverables and XYZ, and you depend on them for your work, then they're going to have to be classified as employees, which adds so much more expense to every company.
Yeah, the benefits of offshoring, we know that there are benefits because every large company does it. Every single one, right? Or not one that doesn't. So we know there are massive benefits, or they just wouldn't be doing it, period, right? So we're part of what we do, and part of our whole intent for this company is to make that outsourcing accessible to smaller and smaller companies, right?
Nice. Yeah.
And make it as painless as possible. That way you can be as competitive as possible. If you're a software developer and you're competing against software development firms in India, right? We can help you be more competitive and still not lose that team culture that you built.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't have to outsource to India. You can outsource to a group of developers in a region that better aligns with the values and the culture of the companies that we tend to build. Yeah.
And you were telling me you have an Albanian developer who's working in the US right now on a contract project?
We have a couple right now. Yeah. And we've had those on and off. We've had one client has had up to 4 at a time. In the 2 years or year and a half that we've been operating, we've had up to 4 clients.
Nice. Now, do you see yourself expanding? Do you see yourself staying in the niche of developers, or do you see yourself expanding other service offerings?
So what we're rolling out now is that I'm free from the Google contract. We're going to start offering some consulting services.
Okay.
So I'll do like business development consulting. And the purpose of this is to come in and like evaluate the company like we were talking about. We can do like a plan for you, like map out your processes and, map out your deficiencies as we see them. I do that for like a very low cost, right? And it has to make sense for your company, and it's designed to open your eyes to the gaps that you have and the improvements that you can make, and sort of initiate a roadmap to get those things done.
Yeah.
Right. Then if you're interested, if that makes sense to you, then we could talk about like an official plan, or like outsourcing your sales to us, or building you an app. What I'm using that for, the reason I do it for a low cost, is I'm going to use it as an opportunity to understand your business so I can send you proposals on the things that I think I can help you with.
Right.
And then as part of the evaluation, I'm going to give you recommendations on the things that I can't help you with that you should go seek out. Right. And then you have all of that. Now, you could take my proposal and go get a counter proposal for that if you want to see what someone else would tell you to test its validity. Right. Or you could act on those proposals on your own without me. That's fine with me. You know what I mean? And this is why I ask for the small fee for the evaluation. That way I'm not married to it. I've been compensated for my time.
Right.
I can walk away from it and I'm happy because you've gained something, you know?
Now, I know the fee might change. Do you want to share the fee, or do you prefer for people to go to your website and contact you?
We do everything one-on-one, and it's usually around $1,500
Okay.
for small companies, right?
Yeah.
Now, like, look, if you're a $10 million a year company,
Oh, yeah, that's going to be
gonna
a little more complex.
more than a few days, which is going to cost more, right? But if you're a standard, if you're making $1 million or less a year, $1,500 is about right. I can do it in a few days. I can look at everything that I have an understanding of in that time, talk to a few people in the organization, and then present you with a series of proposals and a series of recommendations. It's pretty easy. And really, I want that to be the beginning of our relationship, right?
Yeah.
I want you to pick a proposal and let's work with it and we can move forward.
Yeah.
And if not, that's great. Move on. You've compensated me for my time in a fair manner. So we're okay. I offer a money back guarantee on the recommendations. If you really don't think it's worth the $1,500, I'll give it back to you.
Wow.
Right? Nobody has ever asked for that. Because look, as you will know, almost anyone who really cares and really makes an effort could come in and look at an organization if they have some experience and pick out some things that you're missing because you're too close to, right?
Right.
And that's really why. I have really good experience. I have really good education, and I can pick up on some things that you're going to miss.
Yeah.
Just because I have fresh eyes, just because I have a different perspective. And it's almost always worth that $1,500. There's something you could act on. There's something you can change. There's something you can do that'll make a difference immediately. Almost always, Yeah. Little things add up to big things very quickly.
Yep, absolutely. Talking about the services that you offer, because like you said, you build apps, you can build websites, you can do social media. So you do a lot of other capabilities that extend beyond what somebody would normally think of as, a developer or an engineer.
You'll see this when you go to our website. You'll see, skill dynamics, and you'll see, business development, sales, services. You'll see, outsourced talent, and that includes developers, social media managers, salespeople, and we're sub-branding sales dynamics. If you need a full sales team.
Oh, nice.
Well, we will provide you with a full sales team.
Yeah.
I have the ability to recruit from around the world. I have former team members that were with me at Google that are in El Salvador.
Wow.
And they're available. We can build these teams. We can build teams of developers, salespeople, and social media managers very quickly because we have the rosters of them in different locations. We evaluate what your needs are, and we can pick the best people. We can get you a quote very quickly. With developers, even though we're taking that time to match the culture, we could generally find you 2 to 3 candidates within 5 business days.
Wow, that's very fast. Yeah.
Because we maintain a roster and we maintain relationships,
Nice.
My Albanian business partner, her name is Alicia Ravelli. She's a developer herself, very well respected in the community as a developer, but she also has this incredible sense of empathy, and she can really talk with people, and she can really make that cultural match very quickly.
Wow.
She's really good at it. I got really lucky in finding her, but that sort of the same way, my ability to understand and map out processes kind of has led the business development part of the business. Her ability to empathize and understand people quickly have driven the recruiting part of the business.
Nice.
She has this remarkable talent for that. Now that brings us to the question, how do we replicate that so that we can grow, right?
Right.
Because it's a fair thing, but we'll have to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate so many things about our conversation today. The fact that you had all these businesses, you did all this stuff, but then you decided to go back to school and pursue something that you were really passionate about and that you loved, that you figured out that doing online school would help you be a great remote worker, and that you've now built up a company to help other remote workers throughout the world work for businesses. There are so many other nuggets that you shared with us. I'm going to have people go to your website. It'll be in the show notes. Gary, should people reach out to you just via the website, on LinkedIn, anywhere else as well?
On the website or on LinkedIn or on my personal site, which is garywhite.cc.
Okay.
That's basically my personal resume, personal profile.
Fantastic.
Any of those.
Great. And do you have any last thoughts? And do you have a favorite quote or mantra or some words that you live by?
Yeah, my favorite quote is this one from Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change.
Very nice.
I really feel like that is the quote of our time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I really, really do. That is the quote of our time. And that is what has defined my career at this point. It's 100%. My ability to just adapt,
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward with working with people, new people, small companies. If your company is struggling to grow, contact me. If you need developers, just one or two to help out your team or a whole team to build your app, contact me. We can do that. If you need help with social media or your website, contact me. We have those people in place. We're going to listen to you and your needs and your values, and we're going to build a team or assign you to people that are going to share those values and help you build a roadmap to achieving what you want to achieve with your company.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gary, for being here. And I'm going to, as I said, put everything in the show notes. People will know how to reach out to you. I've really enjoyed our conversation, talking about some things that we haven't spoken about before that, after I hit stop on this recording, we're going to get a little more into. I look forward to seeing what projects we can do together. And also for our listeners, I want to let you know that I just launched the Brand Amplifier program. It was originally PR Incubator. I tested it in the market for a couple years, rebranded it as the Brand Amplifier. And now to meet the other side of your small business needs, if you need to learn about marketing, branding, and PR strategy, that is the program for you. You can go to yourbrandamplified.com, click on Brand Amplifier, and it'll take you to all the information that you need. And with that, thank you again, Gary, for being here today. Thank you to our audience for listening to another amazing expert tell his story on Your Brand Amplified. I'm Annika Jackson. I'll be back again in a few days. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.